Recently, I've been talking a little bit with my friends about how to hold the Korean bow and why the way that I hold the bow is different than what most people do. And I've also gotten questions how I actually Khatra or 고자채기 like this and why it looks so kind of fluid and natural. Well, there's a lot of reasons why, but one of those reasons is how I grip the bow. So when I first learned KTA, I learned to do the Hhul-Lyuh-Jhab-Ghi style technique, that's talked about in Joseon Gung-Sul, where you kind of come at the bow like this, and then you wrap it around like that, and you do this, and you see this like big gap open up, right? And you hold these three firm, and you keep these kind of loose, right? And then you kind of like torque the bow like this. Now, there's a bit of a problem with this. You can see that when you try to do that, with a bow that's significantly stronger than your typical kind of target weight KTB, the bow doesn't really respond the way that you think it would, because you try to torque it, there's just way too much tension on the limbs where it doesn't do that. It just does not work well. Like, you can brute force it, but it doesn't work well, okay? The other thing is that you can't do the string torque, whatever thing that people claim that is like, oh, this is the Korean way of whatever, right? It doesn't work. When you're shooting such a high poundage like this, there's so much tension on the string that no matter how much you try to do this, it just does not work. If anything, when I try to do that, the only thing that happened is my hand broke in like that while the bow stayed vertical, and then the string kept coming and slapping me in the back of the wrist here, and it just hurt like crazy. So of course, I started to wonder, okay, is there something in the manuals and the historical record about how to hold Korean warbows? And thankfully, there's actually a number of different techniques described. I'm only going to explain one of them, okay? And this is the one, or at least my interpretation, from the text called 사예 결해, okay? It mentions in the book,
when gripping the handle, an important note is that the third knuckle of the long finger, the middle one, is pointing upwards towards the sky, while using the hogu between the thumb and the index to directly grasp the handle. Then, if the bulging base of the thumb, the thenar eminence that is used to push the handle, when the arrow disengages from the string, it will not be distorted in its flight. If the middle pinky and ring fingers are extended long and grasped firmly, the arrow, when it disengages from the string, will fly far.
Okay, so now that you guys know what it says, right? Unfortunately, we don't have actual footage, obviously, from the time that this book was written. So we don't really know for sure what it means. But all I can say is this. This is my interpretation, and I know that it works. So let's talk about that. The first thing that you have to understand is that it mentions a very important term, hogu. And it also mentions something where it says like push with the 볼록한 부분, which is like right here. 조선의 궁술 refers to this 볼록한 부분 as the 반바닥, which is basically the point at which the bones in the wrists and the bones in the hand meet right here at what's called right there, right at this spot, okay? The hogu in Chinese tradition actually is talking about like the web of the hand right here. However, in Korean traditional archery, it's a little bit more specific. What it's talking about is there is an acupressure puncture, like an acupressure point, like right here, that's referred to as hogu. It's sometimes called hapgok in the modern day. And what we want to do is make the line from the hogu to the 반바닥 as long as we possibly can. Then you take that line and you grip it right on the edge of the handle. In order to do that, you actually, rather than coming at it this way like we do for a 흘려잡기, you actually have to come at it like this with the middle finger knuckle facing upwards towards the sky. It doesn't have to be perfectly like this. It could be a little bit at an angle. The point though is that your hand isn't like vertical like this. It's a little bit more horizontal or diagonal. So you come at it like this. See that? Touch the hogu. Use the knuckle of the index and the thumb to really clamp down hard so that the bow cannot wiggle back and forth, and you only give its the forward direction as the only direction that the bow can go, okay? Then what you do is you drop the 반바닥 down onto the pressure point of the handle here, making solid contact. But again, notice how it's only this part. Unlike 흘려잡기, which uses kind of the bottom here, it's not like this, it's like this. What you then do is use this portion to support the side of the handle, like that. And just like the text says, extend your 3 fingers out, the hasamji, as far as you possibly can, and you hold it like this. Now, from this position, as long as these 2 knuckles are tight, exactly what you do with your fingers doesn't really matter as far as the index and the thumb are concerned. That's up to your personal preference. But when you hold the bow like this, it does something kind of interesting, because unlike 흘려잡기, where when you push, you kind of push like that, and then this grip right here, you try to like torque it with your fingers. What actually ends up happening when you hold it in this manner is that the pressure from the 3 fingers and the pressure from the bottom here of your palm here, the hypothenar eminence, this pressure combined with the pressure from the index and the thumb knuckle prevents the bow from wobbling left and right. Then when you push through the panbadak like this, straight at what you're trying to shoot at, like basically your target, right? Through the pressure point of the handle, you're getting pressure from 3 sides, from the right, from the left, and from this way, like towards the target, right? The only direction now that the bow has kind of an escape path towards is this way, straight towards the target. So as a result of that, instead of like trying to torque the handle like this, if you actually, just as it says in how you get it, hold the bow like this, hold it firm enough, you don't have to death choke it, but you hold it firm enough to not allow the bow to wiggle, right? And then as you push down and you give a little bit of torque like that, not this, but just a tiny bit like this. What ends up happening is the bow will do that, and it will turn on its own momentum at the moment of release. It will literally jump out of your hand like that, and the 3 fingers here allow you to catch the bow. So again, like this. This is the way you do 고자채기 with a high-powered Korean bow. Unlike when you're using a lighter poundage bow and you're using 흘려잡기, where there's a lot of like wrist manipulation, this kind of release is, for the most part, just completely done by the natural momentum, because there's so much power that you don't really have to force it. If you just let the bow do its thing, it will work. Now, when it does, notice how at the moment of release, we're shooting like this with a little bit of cant, right? The bow naturally wants to turn a little bit this way, which helps to create more clearance with the arrow. Then it starts to turn like this, and then you keep pushing it forward and it naturally turns like that. When you actually put it into practice, it might look something like this. But again, notice how natural it is. It's not a forced motion. I have discovered in my constant shooting of high-power KTBs that is the way that you have to 고자채기 with these kind of stronger bows. It just does not work if you manipulate it with the wrist. So it's not that we don't do 고자채기. It's not like an anti-Khatra thing. It's rather a different way of doing 고자채기 and Khatra. And I will also say this, having also tried that kind of technique, this kind of thing where we let the bow do its own thing, even on lighter poundage target KTB, so like, let's say like sub 65 pounds, it still works actually remarkably well. So something to consider, okay? That even in our Korean traditional archery, you may be led to think and believe that we only have one way of holding the bow and this is how you hold it and you do this thing or whatever, but that isn't true. There are multiple different types of grips that are recorded in the historical record. So that's just one of them and my interpretation of how to hold the bow, okay? So hopefully that was helpful.